Hey, welcome back, everybody. Of course, this is Dr. Keith McNally, and this is the Question Guy podcast. And I'm here with Dr. Keith Yoder, and we're about to dive into his book, Healthy Leaders. And so this is a perfect conversation. I've been waiting for this ever since I got your book because you're Dr. Keith and I'm Dr. Keith, and that's so exciting for me. I want to talk to you about it. There would be way too much information to cover in such a enclosed space as a podcast because there's so much value that this book gives, not just to Christian leaders and leaders of the church, but leaders in general, because there's lots of value here. I want to focus on your chapter 3, which is identity and leadership. But before we do that, Dr. Keith, can you give us some insight as to who you are and how you got to write this book?
Well, I've been involved in the field of education from my training in college and teaching in schools at college level. And I always ended up being in leadership in whatever setting I was in. And I was seeing the significance of that, especially as I observed leaders in the organizations I was in. And so more and more, my heart was drawn to care for leaders and to equip leaders, support leaders. And so my observations then that are in the book are from looking carefully at what I saw working well and what did not work well, and also from studying biblical resources to have that foundation as well.
So it sounds like there's an element of passion behind your work, just from what you've said and what's in the book. Where does that passion come from? Now you're let me get this right. You were or are a pastor or a trainer of pastors, because in the book and even at the start of chapter 3, um, well, talk to me about that. You are a pastor or were a pastor.
I have served as a pastor in congregations, but primarily I'm a minister focusing on being a support to pastors and leaders in um, not only in the church, but in nonprofits and family businesses as well.
Okay.
My passion came from, I recall when you asked that question, I recall working on the farm for my uncle when I was a teenager. And we were both members of the same congregation, and he was concerned about the effectiveness of leadership of that organization. And so we would stand there by the tractor talking about it, and it it gave me a heart to see leadership from that perspective.
Okay.
And then later, I was involved in congregations where I sense there's something is not right here. Something's not functioning well. And it boiled down to there was someone exercising leadership who was not really in the position of leadership. And so that gave me a heart to realize, there are principles here of what makes for healthy leadership and what is unhealthy. And so it so happened that in those two cases that I observed, that the person who was really the real leader, but not in a position, happened to be a woman. And it gave me, and it was because of some theological understandings that the women were not recognized for their leadership. And it gave me a heart and a sympathy and actually began a passion to see women released in their leadership and for people to really be honored who are leaders by being given the position and the place to lead. So those are some of the reasons for my passion to see leadership be healthy.
So I do want to get into that, but if it's okay with you, I would like to read a paragraph from chapter 3 that kind of sparks my interest in the concept of identity in leadership. Is that okay?
Let's do that.
Let's do it. So it reads like this. Some leaders, particularly young people just entering leadership, have a tendency to hesitate to take charge and truly lead. I began my teaching career as a sixth grade teacher, and that's speaking of you. Coming out of college, I had my philosophy, I just need to befriend these students. But the school board and parents didn't hire me to be a friend. I had the responsibility to provide a structured environment where students could attain certain objectives. As you can imagine, after 3 weeks of trying to befriend the students, I realized I needed to redefine my identity and embrace the leadership role in the classroom. A teacher's purpose differs from that of the students. The teacher has the responsibility to stimulate learning and guide students into various applications of truth. Now, when I pull out meaning from that very paragraph, it's the idea that there's a distinction and a clear purpose of a leader, regardless of the setting or the environment. Now, this is specific to, a sixth grade classroom, but I think the application is across leadership roles. And
Mhm.
so if you're not clear as to the why you're in that role, thus your purpose and your identity in that role, you I think you called it out. And I'm not going to be at a loss for finding it again, but confusion, I think, is the word, or
Yes.
chaos, maybe, but confusion nonetheless.
Mhm.
Can you speak to that, to why identity and the distinction between the leader and the group that's being led is important?
The leader is there to influence the group or the person toward a certain purpose. And so one has to be able to see that purpose and see how the group can get to that purpose. So therefore, there needs to be ability to detach from the group in order to see what the group needs in order to take it from point A to point B.
Okay.
So it's necessary in order to accomplish whatever the task or purpose is for the group, for the leader's identity to be secure within himself or herself so that they are not just being subject to, well, what do the people want or what do the people feel or what will they think of me if I do so and so. There has to be that clarity that I'm here to help them move from point A to point B toward the purpose that we have as a group.
Without that, where would or is there, and based on your experience, is there truly confusion, not from the point of the leader, but from the perspective of the group? If the leader isn't clear to what is expected, does that create confusion in the group?
Well, at least can create apathy or but yes, I think confusion in terms of what are we doing here? Why are we together?
Okay.
Um, and or if the leader's under is identified as a leader, the group is looking for the leader to exercise some leadership, to give direction. Um, People down deep in their heart, they want clarity of purpose and direction. And when they're in a group, they want leadership to lead.
In the classroom, that would be easily identified, and you did.
Yeah.
It's about achieving whatever curriculum objectives are for that class and for that subject.
Yes.
But if we extend that beyond a classroom, and like you said earlier, both public school and collegiate classrooms, and I was a collegiate professor for a period of time. Um, helping leaders clearly define their purpose can be a daunting task because of the group that they're in. And so I think for managers, managers understand that they have to achieve certain business objectives. But
Mhm.
sometimes, well, a manager is not necessarily a leader and vice versa. Leaders have a visionary or a vision of what they want to achieve. How can they make that purpose valuable to the people that they're trying to lead? And I hope you understand that because I understand my question because I wrote a book on it. And here's my book. And because it's really about the young person, those who are stepping into leadership, helping them really clarify their purpose and then their identity in that purpose. Can you speak to that?
You're really highlighting and focusing it quite well. This is so significant for the emerging leader. I would say that um, it's hard to know where to begin on that. I would say that the young leader needs to recognize that what they see as a possibility, uh, that that what they're seeing is valid. The to stimulate, and I'm using the word stimulate rather than motivate. I believe motivation is within. A person does what motivates them for their own reasons,
Mhm.
but we stimulate others to do things by touching on those motivations. So I believe when we have vision, um, we um, we encourage people with that by being devoted to it ourselves, being willing to sacrifice to make that happen. That passion, that enthusiasm um, is is attractive to the group. Uh, but again, the group is basically going to do things for their own reason, not just following the inspiration of another totally. So, an effective leader is is getting in touch with what is important to the people in the group, and at the same time is calling them to something more than what they are. And again, that's because they have their own sense of identity is clear.
Mhm.
They're able to take the risk to challenge others to follow in the direction that they've pointed.
So how does, and you mentioned it twice. One, it's on the cover of your book, and you've spoken to it just recently. What does it mean to be a healthy leader? Because in and out of this book and what we see, and I don't care where we are in the world, we see it all the time. We see unhealthy leadership. And I like that word and I'll use that word only because those in those types of leadership positions, those types of positions can easily become, ooh, I'm going to be really, I think I need to be cautious in my words here, only because I want to make the point clear without, pointing out people. It can become very narcissistic. It can
Mhm.
become very arrogant. The leader in that position, it can become very self-motivating to be in that position because there's either money or fame or power or prestige, but it
Yes.
doesn't really accomplish the role of leadership, which really in any context needs to be defined, I think. I always like to use the word impact because leaders make an impact, but I think in your what I'm understanding through your talk in your book is that there's a, a clear purpose for a leader to be in a leadership role. Is that purpose always, what is that purpose? Without And you could talk to purpose as a purpose for the teacher in the classroom or umbrella that topic. And is there a purpose for leadership?
Well, leaders are there to move a group of people toward their destiny or what whatever the task is that they are to accomplish together.
Okay.
So if there's a reason for the group being together, then that's what the leaders need to devote themselves to achieving.
So is that identified by the group or the leader or within context of a situation? Or, and it's just about how do you see it?
Yes. Um, Typically, people are gathered, at least informally at first, around some desire or focus or purpose. So, and among themselves, someone will emerge as a leader or they will call someone to be a leader. I like to put it this way: whenever you have two or more people together, one of them becomes the leader in that conversation by somehow shaping the direction that it takes. So um, there's no such thing as a leaderless group. I was actually in a group once that were trying to say, we don't have a leader. So I just observed a little while and I realized the person who kept espousing that doctrine, that idea was the leader.
Okay.
We don't have a leader. So, it's an
Well,
impossibility.
can we talk to that situation in that group? Was there a specific task for that people to be together? And did
Yes,
they
they had,
accomplish it?
um, they stayed together for quite a while, but I don't think they accomplished being together and enjoying relationship, but I don't think they accomplished a task together.
I want to go back to what you said earlier, and that is you are a leader of pastoral leaders or church leaders.
Mhm.
How, what is the power, that may not be that may be a bad word. Um, why is there a need for there to be a leader of or a coach of pastors? Because our pastors lead churches, and I'm agnostic, not that I don't believe, but I'm agnostic of, religion. But I do understand that there's a need to lead people in faith-based ideas. And I'm using my words poorly, and please forgive me. But
That's good.
you're a coach and a trainer of pastors, and so why is that important?
Well, pastors are human beings like everyone else, and they have a sense of purpose and in a spiritual sense, they have a sense of call that they have a stewardship to lead people in a certain direction. So, but like any other leader, they are wise to get coaching on how they lead, to care for themselves as persons, to gain perspective on how they lead, and to grow in their knowledge of what is effective as a leader. So, um, in that sense, they're no different than anyone else who is a leader.
Okay.
Yeah.
I liked that you spoke to self-care. I I I th- I don't know. I know in my circles of conversations that that's a conversation, a topic of conversation. But do you see that lacking as in general when you talk to people who are in leadership positions?
Generally, yes. They get very involved in carrying the responsibility, and then it becomes a 24/7 sense of responsibility.
Okay.
And in a sense, that's good, especially in the helping professions.
Hmm.
Um, you don't leave it at the office, so to speak. And So therefore, there needs to be special discipline and planning to set time apart where you detach from the setting in order to gain perspective and to be refreshed and then re-enter it with that freshness.
So, well, you actually talk to that in it at the end of each chapter, you have a reflections section.
Yeah.
And so the first question literally means or says, list ways in which you regularly detach from your leadership responsibilities. Is do we do you see that as a possibility that you detach from your because you're always associated with the role
Mm.
as leader as long as you're, functioning in that capacity. But to detach oneself from the responsibilities, is that possible?
Well, it's I think well illustrated by the idea of having a commanding view of a situation, which comes from warfare in olden days, where the general or the leader of the army would go up on a hill or mountain and oversee where the battle was taking place. And then from that detachment, instead of being down in the fray, from that detachment gains perspective. Then, with that perspective, gives direction of how to more effectively conduct the battle. So that's the idea. You're still the leader.
Okay.
You're just detaching to gain perspective, and secondly, to be refreshed so that you can enter with fresh passion and insight.
And as a coach, as a leader of leaders, isn't that part of your responsibility to help people detach and
Yes,
regain that perspective? How do you
yes.
do you have any specific, practices or a model that helps people, helps you, help them?
I basically just use questions of, well, first of all, they're meeting with me outside of their setting, so that
Okay.
helps.
Okay.
And then we're overviewing, or we're looking from the hillside, so to speak, on the daily activities that they have. But it's asking questions to help them see it from an overseeing position. Oversight is a good word to capture the posture of it.
Just to kind of bring this to some, wrap around some of your conclusion, this is a faith-based book to the
Yes,
most part. This is a faith-based book, and more in terms of a Christian philosophy, a Christian ideology. Yes, no?
yes, that
Can
would be
can you
correct.
can you speak to the value of the Christian ideology? And because I don't want to use some people use the word spirituality, and that tends to take away from the impact of specific faiths and beliefs, I think. I mean, I could be wrong. Because when we just separate an idea from its ideology, we may get lost in some other stuff. So having a Christian worldview, a Christian philosophy, how does that, well, what is that for one, just for my
Mhm.
clarification, and how does that really help people be better leaders, I guess is the question. Does that
I
make sense?
appreciate it. Yes, I appreciate
Okay.
the clarity of focus there.
Okay.
I would say the essence of Christian leadership is having a intimate relationship with God as Father, whereby one is reinforced in their identity through that relationship. And then that enables one to hear and gain direction from that perspective. And basically, what um, the Christian or Christ example would be that leadership is clear on a sense of mission and purpose from a godly perspective, but then also takes a servant or serving posture in carrying that out. And so the strength of a Christian perspective to leadership is the sense of personal worth and identity from a close or intimate relationship with God. Then out of that, serving in a way that, while retaining that identity as a leader. For example, we often look at Christ's example when he washed the feet of his disciples.
That's a unique
Yeah,
story in
yeah,
scripture. I mean,
yeah,
and I've seen or read that it's been interpreted in different ways. What do you feel is the value of that servant leadership act, I guess is the best way
yes.
to put it.
I think act is a good way of saying it, Keith, because he did not cease to be the leader when he did that. Sometimes it's taught or applied as, well, the leader's just a servant to do whatever meets the needs of the people or what the people want. And then that denies the distinctive of the leader bringing influence and shaping the situation. But when Jesus did that, he said, if I, your master and teacher, or your Lord, your leader, have done this, then you should do it also. But notice, he didn't cease to be the leader when he did an act of service.
And and just to add to that, and you may be wanting to jump in there, but it was, I don't think, because I have read all of scripture. I grew up
Yes.
Catholic. And that may be different than what we're talking now. I just wanted to add that I don't think that the apostles at that time ever didn't think he was still their leader. I don't think so. At least that's in, it's never implied. Do I
That's
have that
correct.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just that applications in our modern day have distorted that, I believe,
I think so
by,
too.
yeah. But yeah, that's why Peter did not want Jesus to wash his feet, because he felt it was not the appropriate role of the leader. Yeah,
And yeah, and that's a good word too.
yeah,
And then I think it was a time, it was a very clear time for teaching, what was expected as
yeah.
they were to move forward, I guess, as respective leaders with the message and mission.
So
Is that
that's
right?
where yes. So I would say a leader serves by leading.
I wanted to read just one more from the book, if that's okay. And I am on page 66
All
because,
right,
and I'm not clear what, only because it's relevant. Is it okay to read that?
please.
Healthy leaders, and this is a blurb to the side of the main text. It says healthy leaders have a clear sense of responsibility and serve faithfully. They remain accessible to people within the matron that I'm not quite sure what that is, and I'm a doctor. The matron that God has designated to them. On the other hand, healthy leaders restrict their service and accessibility for matters that are outside of their matron. And so, Roy, I wanted to ask you what that meant.
Well, metron is a Greek word that's used in the scripture in just one place. And it's the idea of a field or sphere of service or influence.
Okay.
So, in other words, your metron is what you own or are responsible for. Um, like your house would be your metron. It's not somebody else's metron.
Okay.
If a farmer is farming a field, his field is his metron, not the neighboring farmers to decide what is done there.
Okay. So
So,
it's their area of influence and responsibility.
yes.
Okay.
So, serving within that, being accessible, available, attentive to the people in that sphere of influence is critical, as well as being responsible to carry out whatever the task is in that metron.
I like it. I love it. Dr. Keith Yoder, thank you for this conversation. It's been enlightening and empowering, at least for me, and hopefully
Mm.
for all those who listen. And so I appreciate your time.
Well, I'm really glad we have gotten acquainted. And as one Keith to another Keith, I think what you're doing is very helpful to people. Lead on.
Well, thank you so much. This has been another edition of the Question Guy podcast, and we'll see you later. Take care.